Hi, it's the Soul Whisperer, Amy Shaw here. What I want to talk about today is healing, and specifically how we manifest healing and how the law of attraction actually really does play a part in healing. If you've been watching my channel for a long while, then you know that I've made previous videos talking specifically about the law of attraction, as well as, within the videos, as that topic just comes up in relation to other things that I've talked about. I've talked about it. So I'm very familiar with it. I've actually engaged in a year-long experiment with the law of attraction. And so it's not my favorite topic. It's not my favorite thing. And there's reasons for that. I won't exactly go into it. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you choose to look at whether the glass is half empty or half full, the law of attraction does play at least some part in healing. So I want to tell my story. Again, if you've been watching my channel for a little while, then you know. If you don't know, I'm just going to tell the story a little bit. July 3rd, I stepped off of my neighbor's concrete patio onto her grass, and I rolled my ankle. I fell down, and I got back up, and I walked home, but come to find out the next day, I had actually broken my ankle bilaterally. Both bones, both lower leg bones at the ankle were broken, one of them in two different places. I'm really fortunate. The breaks were straight and clean, so I didn't need surgery to pin them, but it's been a long process of healing. We are in mid-January, late January now, and so it's been a good solid 6 months of healing. And I had some complications. 3 weeks into that healing process, I developed a blood clot. So I learned a lot. I was hyper conscious about the healing, and really trying to tune into it and learn as much as I could from the process and my body, my relationship to my body, and all of that stuff. So at the time that I got the blood clot, in fact, I made a video talking about manifesting healing and how I was, working with the comfrey salve and the arnica gel, and daily I was tending to my ankle. Twice a day I was putting the gel and the salve on and massaging it to try to get some of the swelling down, and I was doing everything I was supposed to do, everything the doctor prescribed. Not putting weight on my ankle, using the crutches, using my little knee scooter. Everything I was told to do is what I was doing, and it was a very, very, very difficult time. So how did I develop this blood clot? So another interesting thing that happened when I went to my checkup, I think it was about 4 or 5 week checkup with the doctor. It was after I had my blood clot, and he had been on vacation when I got my blood clot, so he came back and he saw me and he's like, "Oh, bummer, you got a blood clot, I heard." Yes, and we had this little discussion. I had my x-ray. I came back from the x-ray, and while we were waiting for the x-rays to come back, he says, "So, how is your leg?" And at this point, I was only like a week into this blood clot, so my leg was still very painful. It was still like a discolored, sort of reddish purple. I'm still very swollen. And so I looked down at my ankle, and I lifted my leg up to sort of gesture to him, "Well, look, can you see? This is how it is." And he immediately said to me "Don't look, don't look, don't look at it. Just stop looking at it." Now, this doctor is an elderly man. I'm guessing that he's around retirement age. His bedside manner definitely conveyed that to me, that he sort of had one foot in the clinical exam room and one foot out on the golf course. Like he's ready. He's ready to be done. So he didn't have the best bedside manner. He was a little bit terse and sort of difficult to deal with. Wasn't my favorite doctor. But by the same token, along with that comes decades and decades of practice and wisdom, right? And so at the time, I'm like, "What do you mean, don't look at it?" So I was really offended by his approach, that don't look at it, like as if I was doing something wrong. It was kind of terse and almost assaultive, the way he came at it with me. But as time went on, I began to realize actually that he was imparting a tremendous wisdom to me about healing. This is the first broken bone I've ever had. So I have done healing, like from my stage 4 cancer, which has not been any easy feat whatsoever, but never a broken bone like this, where you know, it was just a very different experience, and I won't even get into the differences. It was just a very different experience. And even how it occurred and why it occurred and all of that played a really significant part psychologically in the healing process. So I was trying to work on that on every different level. So it wasn't until a few weeks later that I began to slowly realize that his advice to me to not look at my ankle, in other words, don't pay it attention, was actually really good advice. Another piece of advice that I got when I, was able to start putting weight on my ankle, I think I was about 6 to 8 weeks into the healing. It was time for me to take the boot off and put weight and start walking and doing all the normal things. Well, there's a rehabilitation process that has to occur, because, not only have you had bone injury, you've had soft tissue injury as well, and then you've had your leg basically stabilized for, a pretty long period of time. So you have to go through a rehabilitation process. So I started in physical therapy, and one of the first things my physical therapist said to me is that, when you walk, try not to think too much about it. Just like before you broke your ankle, walking was just second nature, like riding a bike or driving a car. Your body has been doing this for decades, and you know how to basically do this without thinking about it. So now you have this injury, and now you're thinking about it. Like every step you take, you're thinking about it. And she said you can actually develop a limp or a hobble, by being too mindful of the way that you walk. So basically, don't think about it, just walk. And once again, really, really good advice, because I realized that the more attention I was actually paying to the pain, to the injury, to the swelling, the more in my mind I perceived that my ankle wasn't healing, that I wasn't well yet. And so it became like a conscious everyday thing. And so going back to what I was saying that first 3 weeks, as I was tending to my ankle every day, it became like my whole entire world, basically because I was immobile. I couldn't walk. I couldn't put any weight on it at all. I wasn't allowed to. Even with the boot on, I was told specifically not to put any weight on it until 3 weeks. So this really limited me. I was basically couch bound for the majority of the day. And, with all that kind of time and that huge disruption in daily life and the sacrifices that you have to make to heal, it was constantly on my mind. Healing from this ankle, healing. I just wanted to heal and get on with it. Healing, 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 healing. Well, in actuality, the way the law of attraction works is that the more you focus on something, the more you draw it to you. So even though I was focusing on healing, 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 and you think, well, this is a positive thing, then healing should come to me. In actuality, when you're focusing on healing, what you're fundamentally saying to yourself is that I'm wounded and I'm injured. So even though I was being so-called positive by, having my thoughts be about healing and being well, it was coming from that fundamental negative position of saying that I was injured and something was wrong with me. So it's the same thing. I have this girlfriend, she was struggling with weight loss. And she was telling me, I ride my bike 7-8 miles a day and I'm not losing any weight. I don't know. I don't understand what's wrong. And it's easy for me to say this, but putting it into practice is a totally different thing. But I knew intuitively right away that what the problem was is her approach to it. Because rather than loving her body and accepting her body the way it was, she was saying to herself, I'm fat and I want to lose weight. And she was almost punishing herself to try to get the weight to come off. And so from a law of attraction standpoint, this is actually going to have the opposite effect of the effect that you want. And I've talked about law of attraction too, in terms of how we manifest our appearance. Somebody recently commented on that video. It's a couple years old now, maybe. At least a year old, and he was asking me to make another update or another video talking about how we manifest appearance. So I have had that a little bit on my mind, as I'm gaining a little bit of weight. I having my broken ankle, I wasn't able to go to the gym anymore, and I become more sedentary. So 6 months of being more sedentary and cautious with how I'm using my ankle, I've put on some weight. And, I noticed this. So manifesting appearance, there it is. There's that aspect of it. I'm consciously thinking about it as well. So that's only going to compound the problem and make it worse. And so anyway, going back to my ankle and healing and manifestation and how that works, I really realized that there is a lot of wisdom in that. It's better, and even in terms of my cancer, getting from that point of saying, I have cancer to I had cancer was a very tricky, sort of murky place to be. And I've certainly met many, many women with metastatic cancer, as I have, who are in that same dilemma or have gone through that same dilemma and come to the conclusion that although they have no evidence of disease because cancer is technically incurable, they're telling themselves, I'll never get to the point of saying I had cancer. I'm always going to be saying I have cancer. Okay? I understand this on that level of logic, but I'm telling you from a point of healing, I had to look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm done. I am done with this. And I still go to chemotherapy. I do that every 3 weeks. I've talked about this many, many times. There's reasons for that. Maybe someday I'll actually make a video talking specifically about that from a very, very heart-centered personal space. But right now, this is not the video to do that. The reasons why I'm still in chemotherapy and all that stuff, and healing and all that stuff, and how truly all of that is integrated and related and all of that stuff. So, you know, going back to my cancer, you know, I really literally had to get to the point where I looked in the mirror and said, okay, and it was a hard thing because days would go by where I was like back to living life as normal. Not completely normal, you know, don't get me wrong. I have long-term permanent side effects, so-called permanent side effects of cancer treatment. You know, physically in my body, I don't have breasts anymore. You know, on my right side, it's just a massive amount of it's pure scar tissue. The muscle's been completely like burned to a crisp through radiation, and so I've been through a lot. And I have no lymph nodes on this side, so you know I get lymphedema in this arm, and I've had cellulitis twice, life-threatening, in this arm because I don't have a lymphatic system to help clear out any kind of infectious material that might get in through bug bites or finger pricks or whatever else is going on in that arm. So I have these lifelong side effects of the cancer treatments that I've had. So there's no escaping that. So when I say, you know, life is normal, I don't mean like life as it was before I got cancer, because it will never be that again. But there were days where I would just go about life like where cancer wasn't a daily thing on my mind, you know, where I was just doing stuff and back to functioning within my limitations and my capacities, you know, as they changed after cancer treatment. But I was engaging in life, adapting to all my disabilities in a way where I wasn't even conscious of them anymore, you know, almost like a second nature of driving or riding a bike. I wasn't consciously connecting to, oh, this disability and this is how it's limiting me and I have cancer. I wasn't. And so days would go by and I remember I would look in the mirror in my bathroom there at my house in California and I would just say, am I in denial? Am I in denial? And then it would swing me back the other way of, you know, wanting to make sure that I wasn't bypassing any sort of deep emotional and psychological healing that I still needed to do. So I'd swing back into it and really focus, you know, on the cancer and the treatment and, you know, and then I would just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I did that for a long time, and that was that phase of going, okay, do I have cancer? I had cancer. It was that phase of going through that. I know a lot of women in the breast cancer community, and some of them, you know, these stage 4 women, I admire them. I mean, they've been through a lot as I have been through a lot. I'm way farther out than most of them. You know, I have 15 years now in May. It will be 15 years since I was diagnosed, and it'll be 12 years since I became metastatic. So that's a really long time, and there aren't very many people like me who are living 12 years with so-called metastatic disease. But some of these women who are, you know, a little bit newer in their process on their path, you know, in terms of the years that they've been dealing with this, they're really strong advocates for breast cancer research and breast cancer funding, and, you know, they're very medical modeled in their way of approaching it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because truly it takes all kinds, and I would never suggest that research and medications, that we shouldn't pursue that route when we're dealing with, you know, cancer treatment, cancer cure. That's a legitimate path, okay? But the problem is that if these women are every day, this is their reality, and they have to hold on to this reality in order to impassion them to do the advocacy work. So every day they get up and they're like, I have metastatic cancer. Even though they have no evidence of disease currently at the time, they're still telling this themselves. I have metastatic cancer. This is incurable. And every day they're going and going and going and going with this story. They will say that people such as me, that I'm in this situation so-called because of luck, because there's nothing that I did any different than anyone else did who died, and here I am, I'm still living. And, you know, they'll say it's something about the physiology or the biology or the way that the treatments, you know, were more effective for me than they were other people. And so this is why we need research, because that's the path to the cure for everybody, is understanding people like me, exceptional responders, and how well we've did and why and all of this stuff. And again, I'm not saying that's an illegitimate path. It's a valid path. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to take up that torch and you know, go march down the powers that be to, you know, create a better world for us. But for me personally, that's not my path, because I cannot imagine getting up every day and looking in the mirror and having that reality about myself, saying I have cancer, I have metastatic cancer, and just, you know, holding on to that to such a degree that it's completely altered my life 150% to where I'm going out and advocating for cancer. I just can't imagine that being my life. You know, I've pretty much gone back to life as normal as it can be in my limitations prior to cancer. And that's come from me actually almost like letting it go, not focusing on it. In the same way that the physical therapist told me, you know, don't focus on how you walk, because if you focus on how you walk, you're going to perceive that your ankle's weak, that it's in pain, and you're going to hobble or you're going to limp. And then, you know, over time, you're going to develop this permanently. You know, and for the rest of your life, you'll be hobbling or limping. You know, and that was great advice. It was really great advice. I have experienced this firsthand multiple times in this healing process with my ankle, where the second I start concentrating or focusing on, oh, look, it's a little swollen. And then next thing you know, oh, it's starting to hurt. And then next thing you know, I'm like up and elevating my ankle for, you know, a 24-hour period, because, you know, and it's stiff and I'm having problems with it. A couple of days ago, I went for an ultrasound in my leg to check and make sure that the blood clot in my deep vein had dissolved. It's interesting because she was asking me where was the blood clot, and I was telling her, you know, the exact location, the exact vein that it was in the lower leg and all of this. And so as she's doing this ultrasound, you know, they have to take the Doppler and they push it in, and they do all sorts of things. They like squeeze your leg and, you know, to try to like alter the blood flow so they can see, you know, how the blood flow is throughout the entire leg. So they start really high up in the groin, the femoral artery, and they work their way all the way down to the bottom, you know, towards the ankle, to look at all the veins in the leg. So as she's doing this, you know, and we're talking and I'm telling, you know, just, it's interesting, she got to this spot where my blood clot was, and as she's pushing the Doppler in on that spot, I physically could feel the pain as if the day that I went in there the first time with my blood clot. Like my whole leg was just like, it really hurt. And there was no reason for that to hurt. She wasn't doing anything abnormal or pressing on a tender spot. She was just putting pressure on the Doppler in that spot in my leg where the blood clot was. But because I knew that's where it was, and I knew I was laying here on the table to see if I still have this blood clot, psychologically, it's almost like a phantom pain. I created this pain in my leg in that exact spot that mimicked the original pain that I felt when I actually had the blood clot. And then when it was time to get up from the table, my ankle was really, really stiff, and it felt really weak. Like I almost felt like I could fall if I'm not careful with every step, and how I'm putting pressure on it, and it made me almost want to hobble. So, and that was 100% psychological, because I walked in there and I was perfectly fine, no problem, not even thinking about my ankle. It wasn't swollen, it wasn't hurting, it wasn't stiff, it didn't feel weak, none of that stuff. So this is how the law of attraction actually can work against us in healing. Because even if we're hyper focused on the positive aspects of healing, like I said, we're coming at it fundamentally saying that we're injured or we're wounded. Sometimes in terms of a law of attraction perspective with healing, the best thing to do is actually ignore it. And I know that that feels like denial. It feels like, am I in denial if I'm ignoring what my body's telling me? So I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, if you're having symptoms, don't go to the doctor, just ignore it. Please do not misunderstand me. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, as you're on your allopathic path, firmly on that path, and you're getting the treatment that you need from the allopathic model, and you should be getting better. And if you're not getting better, or you're struggling, or you don't know why or what's wrong, to consider the part that your spiritual and psychological relationship with your body is playing in the healing process, and how you're hyper focused on the healing, or your pressure on yourself to hurry up and heal, or all these external things you're doing to tend to the healing, or whatever. Or even, the therapeutic things, psychotherapy, whatever things that you're doing to tend to the healing, that might actually be having the opposite effect than what you're trying to achieve, because you're too hyper-focused on it. At some point you have to just let it go and trust. My body has the inherent innate wisdom to do what it needs to do to heal, and my mind doesn't have to actually be in control of this. My ego mind, and that ego is that voice in your head, that sense of yourself, how you're perceiving yourself in your body. And that goes back to the, how we manifest our appearance, how we perceive ourselves and the way that we look, how we perceive our health and the way that we feel, how we perceive our pain and the way that we experience it. All of these things, losing weight, gaining weight, getting old, getting wrinkles, getting gray hair, whatever. All of these things are related to the ego and our self-perception. So it's better, if you're in a healing process, to actually get out of your ego mind completely, and just allow your higher self, the wise self, the one that's not necessarily 100% connected into the ego at all times, to allow that self, to entrust that self to do the innate healing that's required in your body, and just let it go. Get back to focusing on all the other ego tasks that you have to focus in this realm that we're in, the adulting and the daily responsibilities. And yes, those might be somewhat restricted by whatever you're going through that's requiring the healing, whether it's, mental health, emotional, psychological, spiritual, or physical thing that you're going through. Whatever that is, it may be inhibiting your daily life, or altering your daily life, or, restricting you in certain ways. But we adapt. So adapt to those restrictions, but don't hang on them. Don't tell yourself over and over and over, I have these restrictions, this is what I can't do. Adapt and overcome, and figure out the way to make it work with your new found limitations, and forget about it. Don't think about it. Don't hang on it. Just keep rolling on with life, and the more you don't think about it, the more healing actually comes to you. So I hope that I gave you some insight into how the ego mind, how our thoughts, how can play into the law of attraction, and how that can actually ultimately inhibit our healing, and maybe some ways that you can encourage healing by letting go of some of that identification and those thought patterns around that, to just become free of the injury or the illness or the wounding in a way that allows your higher self to do the work of actually healing. So as always, if you have questions or comments, leave them below the video. I would love to engage and talk with you. If you want to talk with me privately, there's a lot of different ways that you can get a hold of me. Just look around on my YouTube channel and you'll figure out the ways. Otherwise, I am a shamanic practitioner in the Austin, Texas area. So if you're in the area or willing to drive into the area, I would absolutely love and be honored to meet you in person and work with you in person. If you're not and you're still interested in working with me, reach out to me. I do distance sessions, and I'm available to do that by a variety of different means. So I appreciate your time in watching this. If you have a moment, just give it a thumbs up to like the video, or share it if you're feeling compelled by it, or it spoke to you, or you know somebody else that's struggling with healing and it might give them some insight. So I love you guys so much, and I hope you have a great day.